Zahadum is the finale of Season 3, the point that it has been building towards. It has seen the sweep of authoritarianism throughout Earth Dome-controlled space, the independence of Babylon 5, the fate of Babylon 4, the growth of an alliance against the Shadows, and the fall of Avorlon. But this is a moment of significance, something alluded to throughout the season, and this time, the story inverts. We had a big battle last time in a confrontation between the Shadows and Sheridan's alliance. Now it becomes something small and personal, but will still affect the entire galaxy. We get filled in with previous footage of how Sheridan's wife, Anna, was on the Icarus, the same ship that Mr. Morden was on, and never returned, presumed dead. Sheridan learned they went to Zahadum, where they awakened the Shadows, who don't like when young whippersnappers interrupt their naps. And speaking of napping...
When Minbari become close, it is tradition that they spend 3 nights together. The male sleeps, and the female watches.
It's a simulation of what it's like once they're finished having sex. We soon catch up with where the last episode ended, as Anna Sheridan walks through the door alive and well.
My God. What are you doing here?
What are you doing here? After 5 years, that's the best that you can do?
Well, he didn't spend those years plotting what to say when his zombie wife walked in. This is all kind of off the cuff. It might shock you to learn we don't spend a lot of time preparing for any possible eventuality. I mean, I'm not sitting here with a speech ready in the off chance I'm named Emperor of Ontario. Delenn leaves to make this less awkward, at least for her, but Sheridan is hesitant to accept this as reality. Besides past deceptions and the fact that he has a lot of enemies, Anna doesn't behave in a way that a loved one finally returned would. There's nothing to suggest that she understands what a shock this is, helping him move past it. She acts like he should just accept the obvious reality of the impossible being true. This might be what is setting off Sheridan's red flag. I mean, if I were gone and knew I'd likely be presumed dead, I would spend my time returning, thinking of how best to get them to understand and accept that truth, not show up and complain that their first words weren't what I wanted them to say. If I were like Sheridan, I mean, my wife is nuts. It's entirely possible her first words would be telling me about issues with the cat's poops. It's not until he clearly is not accepting her that she starts trying to be more understanding. But even that is starting to come across as manipulative, because she's talking about taking him to Zahadum. Personally, I'd stick with Ontario. After the titles, Jakar has hooked Ivanova up with some thermonuclear mines to help deal with future shadow attacks, if they know that they're coming, of course. Otherwise, they're just something to get drunk and shoot with a potato gun. Meanwhile, Sheridan has brought Anna down to MedLab, where Franklin says that every test confirms this is the real McCoy. But 5 years is a long time. He took her death hard and had to move on, but it's still a tender wound, as the episode when he tossed Morden into a cell demonstrated. So Sheridan goes to question Delenn about this, but she says that the only ones the Shadows ever spare are those who will work with them. So if she's alive, well, QED, ipso facto, e pluribus unum, by Menon. But Sheridan won't accept that Anna would do that, but she is most definitely alive. So instead, he wants to know why they were so emphatic that she was dead. And she admits that they didn't want him to go to Zahadum on account of it getting him killed. That would ruin all of their plans that require him to be alive. She says they truly didn't think that she was alive. But because Minbari don't lie, she has to admit when directly asked that if they did know, they wouldn't tell unless they knew whether or not it was the same Anna Sheridan. Well, Sheridan fumes at the presumption of choosing that for him. But suffice to say, this has caused some serious problems with their relationship. It's really time to go tell his wife how disappointed he is with his girlfriend. Elsewhere, Londo is drinking away his troubles, and those troubles are that he is being promoted to the royal court. Yep, that'll put it in perspective for you when you go into work in your cubicle tomorrow, huh? Think how good you've got it. Actually, Londo knows what this means, that those in power want to use this to keep Londo from becoming a threat. It's a way of keeping him busy and also keeping tabs on him. so that, if necessary, they can make sure that he accidentally falls down on a knife several times. And speaking of premature ends, an associate of Mr. Morden swings by to advise Londo to get off the station pronto. Looks like they weren't too happy with that defeat. Some people take their win rates very seriously. They don't like to draw down their percentages. It hurts their draft chances. Well, now Sheridan is with Anna, and it seems that Delen's words have stuck with him, because despite the way he stormed out of there, he regards Anna with suspicion. And frankly, she just isn't acting normal. The only thing she even slightly seems interested in when it comes to his feelings is if it can be used to suggest going to Zahadum. It's like his wife has been possessed by a pushy travel agent trying to hit her quota.
And if I don't go?
Then I'll go back without you.
That's a big red flag right there. There is no way Sheridan would be so in love with someone who could just step into his life, announce she was alive, and then leave. Not unless she had moved on and was with someone else. And even then, she would tell him. I mean, not all relationships are perfect, but this is the behavior of someone who feels nothing for their partner at all. Sheridan finally agrees that he'll go, but if and only if he gets an explanation of what happened to the Icarus. So, Intergalactic Expeditions, that's the company that was responsible for the monster and infection way back in early Season 1, sent the Icarus to Zahadum after a probe showed that there'd be some good stuff there. But what had tipped them off was that shadow vessel on Mars that Garibaldi told them about, remember? The Interplanetary Expeditions people left a homing beacon on it so that when the Shadows claimed it, they would be able to track it back to their world. She says the Shadows aren't menacing like the name suggests, and that the crew weren't killed by the Shadows but died in an accident. The survivors were asked to keep silent to protect the Shadows while they were vulnerable, and have been learning about all this great technology that will help us leap forward 1,000 years. Sheridan plays along, but Franklin has found some interesting information based upon the scarring on the back of Anna's neck. So he's not sold that the beings slaughtering their way across the galaxy are the good guys here. But Sheridan does tell Garibaldi to have the crew of the White Star pulled so they can be fully set up for security clearance. Oh, and tend to some of those important matters.
Care of. Son of a bitch.
It's against regulations to address a senior officer in those terms, Mr. Garibaldi.
I was just wondering what the fuck was up with this horse shit, sir. That's better. But time to get ready for the trip.
To Zahadum, you will die.
And as someone who's dead, I ought to know. So they head out, a little put off because the White Star is partially Vorlon technology. Apparently there's this taboo that the Shadows will die if Vorlons touch their world. Although if that were true, I think this war would have been settled a long time ago if it only required the Vorlons to win one game of tag. So to avoid any discomfort, they leave the White Star in orbit and then take the shuttle down, where Anna takes them to an area specifically set aside for the survivors. Mr. Morden is there, as is this fellow who won't say his name.
Who are you?
Who decides that the workday is from 9 to 5 instead of 11 to 4? Who decides that the hemlines will be below the knee this year and short again next year?
Who holds back the electric car? Who makes Steve Gutenberg a star? We do. We do.
I'm with them.
He finally says that his name is Justin and they can get down to business. Back on B5, Sheridan's time-delayed message to Delen arrives, where he explains to her what he's doing, and about how his experience in the future, during all those events with Babylon 4, remember, convinced him that this is the right move, that it will hopefully prevent the devastation of Centauri Prime and maybe end the war. But on Zahadum, Justin explains that about 1 million years ago, the big swinging dicks around here outgrew their corner of space and started to move on, except for the Vorlons and the Shadows, who wanted to help the younger races to grow up. The Shadows' philosophy is that conflict builds strength. The survivors are better than the ones lost. This justification seems dubious because usually in war, those who are strong tend to wind up being put into peril, while those weaker are held back. I'm not even talking about societies that are interested in sentimentality. That's just being practical. You don't fight a battle with your weakest forces unless either losing or having those people slaughtered somehow helps you to win the battle or the war. Come on, let's gather up all the wounded, the sick, and the soldiers ready to retire and form them into one company that will end this war for good. We'll call them Disposable Company 1. But having spoken of how important conflict and atrocities have been in making humanity what it is today, they then begin bitching that the Vorlons are cheating by getting involved in the development of the other races, even to the point of genetic manipulation. I mean, it is one thing to encourage a war of genocide, but it's quite beyond the pale to actually give people the ability to read minds. That's why the Shadows got in with the Psi Corps on Earth, to ensure that the telepaths would be their allies instead of being weapons used against them. Back at Babylon 5, the Shadows have decided enough is enough and have the place surrounded. And this is tied into the drama playing out on Zahadum. Justin says that the obstacle to the Shadows and their goal of a stronger galaxy with humanity at the lead is Sheridan and his stupid need to get people to help each other instead of dying on their bayonets like they're supposed to. Destroying B5 destroys Sheridan's support network. But destroying the man himself would be a mistake. It only creates a martyr that strengthens the unity of the Alliance. So they want him to switch sides instead. But Sheridan now makes his displeasure about Anna known, that she must have been put into one of those ships, hence the scarring. They pulled her out, but the experience of it stripped away her personality, turning her into this empty husk that does what she's told. And shockingly, the Shadows have no intention of following through on that no-harm thing.
And so will you!
But it seems that Sheridan was savvy enough to see this coming. When we next see him, he's found his way towards an underground city, but with a dome on the surface. And so he calls down the White Star, which has a pair of nuclear mines on board. He flies it inside and is about to ruin the Shadows' day. Anna tries one last time to stop him, saying that this new personality built on her memories could love him. But these words are said with less sincerity than if you asked Siri for love. Instead, Kosh tells Sheridan to jump over the edge, which is worrisome because a lot of us have an inclination to jump near ledges. It's theorized this is the brain's way of scaring us into staying away from the edge. But to have it come as the voice of a dead Vorlon, that makes the whole situation just plain confusing. But he jumps anyway. The nukes go off. Anna gets one right in the face, which is definitely not the way that I saw Little House on the Prairie ending, believe me. In response to all of this, the Shadows leave B5 alone. Garibaldi's ship vanishes in the chaos. And Jakar gives us the closing monologue about the moment's pause and everything now that all this has happened, and what will come when it begins again.
All hail your